Hello everybody, welcome to Eternal Brews. My name is Pojo, and I heard that Vara and Azindel were both really good cards right now, so I made you this deck. Yeah, this is a redux of our Azindel's Path list. We are playing with Azindel the Wayfinder and, of course, Vara Vengeance Seeker to generate a really fascinating Void Recursion / Invoke the Waystones deck that happens to be a ton of fun. This is a redux of a previous list that we have done before, but we are updating it for Defiance, and I actually climbed to Master with this deck this month, going from, I think, Gold 3 to Diamond 1, and then to Master and beyond. We've been playing with this deck quite a bit. I've been having a lot of fun with it. It's pretty well competitive, or at least competitive enough to get me to Master, and we've had some pretty good times with it. So not only is it competitive, but it is very, very silly, so that's basically where we want it to lie, and that's when we start making up the brews. So let's talk about this list and what it is that we're planning to do with it. So the basic idea behind this list is that we are using Azindel the Wayfinder to push out Invoke the Waystones, and every time that we invoke the Waystones, we discard cards from our deck, putting them into the void. Putting them into the void from any source allows us to trigger Azindel's ability to give us additional maximum power, which then allows us to play more Invoke the Waystones until we're up to 3 or 4 Invoke the Waystones a turn, and then eventually 5 or 6. Basically, we just play cards out of our deck infinitely, and then we shuffle our deck back into our deck with Lumen Reclaimer and do it all over again. Again and again and again. Typically, it doesn't take more than one cycle of the deck to get complete board dominance and blow out your opponent, but every once in a while you get those really nice long games where you have, 250 power, you're playing just a ton of random stuff, you're stealing all of your opponent's stuff with some of the cards that we'll talk about that have been added to the list, and we're doing some really, really, really cool stuff just basically all around. So let's get right into it. First things first, we have to have a decent base of cards to get to Azindel and to play Azindel quickly. That means Trailmaker and Initiative the Sands to ramp ourselves, and also to make sure that we have extra power and influence to gain for Azindel, who costs, unfortunately, double shadow and double time. We also use, of course, all of the crests, all of the banners, and all of the seats just to make sure that we are hitting those particularly high influence requirements. This deck used to run World Bearer Behemoths, but we are now particularly pushing the shadow side and trying to rely a little bit less on the time side, with the exception of course, Invoke the Waystones. Talir's favorite, however, has got us covered on the time side. We're definitely getting time sigils out of our deck from that, and Aurelian Merchant also gets us some power ramp, allowing us to get to 4 or 5 very, very quickly, and then play cards on top of 4-cost cards like Twilight Hunt. So all of that extra power definitely helps quite a bit. We have a ton of ramp in this deck, and that's all to get us to the good stuff and to get us to stuff that we can play pretty consistently. Okay, so at the top, aside from Azindel, and we'll talk about the Azindel Invoke combo a little bit more, but at the top, we have Vara Vengeance Seeker and Shadowlands Tyrant, which are specifically big cards that when played have a lot of onboard impact, or rather that when played with killer effects have a lot of onboard impact. Both of them scale consistently over time. Vara Vengeance Seeker scales every time it's brought back from the void, and Shadowlands Tyrant scales every time it attacks the enemy, which when we combine it with killer effects like Xenan Temple and Twilight Hunt, allows us to trigger that ability the turn that it comes into play and use it to create basically a very, very big chunk of lifesteal and life gain, as well as something that actually controls the board and kills off our opponent's units. This deck can go toe-to-toe with some of the Firetime Primal lists that are out there, and a lot of the red, green, purple lists that are out there, because these cards are so good on recursion, and they frequently kill all of that big stuff just by basically fighting with it. So that's basically what we're looking for. Obviously, we get shut down by Void Recursion, and we're trying to keep that away, but there are plenty of ways to walk around that. Beyond that, we have one Royal Guardian in the list. This card is specifically designed to be played off of Grasping at Shadows or Invoke the Waystones, but when it is played, it gives us a bunch of health equal to the number of cards in our void. I've had versions of this list that actually run all 4 copies, but this is actually a card that just only needs 1, because you typically just want to pitch it into the void as soon as you can, or play it near the end of your deck when you can gain just a ton of life off of it and do something really sweet with it. Okay, so all of that is our basic creature base. We have Lumen Reclaimer as a 1-of and Royal Guardian as a 1-of, both to pick out of the deck when we were playing Invoke the Waystones. Lumen Reclaimer allows us to shuffle our own deck into basically basically shuffle our own Void into our deck, allowing us to restart the cycle and play those cards over and over again. In addition, since it duplicates itself every time it dies, we get to consistently play this card again and again if we can get it to kill itself. So giving it Killer allows us to have a 4/4 killer unit that when it dies puts 4 copies of another 4/4 killer unit into our deck. This is really useful if we want to have Void hate of our own, if we want to shut down things like Haunted Highway or anything that's using Vara the Fate Touched. We basically want to be able to shuffle our opponent's deck into their Void and to mess with their stuff. We've done this to do things like make sure that Kenadins doesn't have any spells, make sure that Vara decks don't do anything too crazy, make sure that there's no Haunting Screams or Dark Returns on merchants and other things in like Skycrag or Haunted Highway decks or anything along those lines. Basically, all of this kind of like interesting like Void hate is really, really useful, and sometimes you want to use it as that and then wait until later to resurrect it again to basically keep yourself a little bit tidier. Okay. So, Azindel the Wayfinder ties the whole list together. This card gives you +1 maximum power, and then whenever another unit goes to a Void, you get another +1 maximum power. That's enemy units or your units, and it also includes units that are discarded to the Void through cards like Invoke the Waystones, which discards the top 4 cards of your deck to play the top card of your deck. And also, of course, creates a new copy of Invoke the Waystones. Once you get to the second iteration of your own deck building, you'll have a bunch of Invoke the Waystones that you have created and thrown into your Void that will already be in your deck, and your Invoke the Waystones can frequently hit another Invoke the Waystones and hit another Invoke the Waystones until you're just chaining these cards together and giving Azindel more and more power to grow. That's a really fantastic thing to do. It's a lot of fun, but like basically the main thing that's cool about Invoke the Waystones is that you can use it to constantly generate cards, and then when you feel it's getting too expensive or like your Azindel dies, something along those lines, just trade it into the market for something usable, of which we have several different options. We use Excavate to grab back cheaper Invoke the Waystones, any sort of like Grasping at Shadows or Dark Return type effect so that we can bring back units, and in a pinch, a unit that we really, really desperately need. Remember that Excavate can be used to grab a Dark Return, and even though the Dark Return gets Void bound, the unit that you are getting does not get Void bound, so you won't have any issues resurrecting a Vara Vengeance Seeker over and over and over again. Also keep in mind this does incur card disadvantage, so unless you have something in your hand to sort of offset that card disadvantage, specifically Invoke the Waystones, try not to grab this card unless you absolutely need it for the life gain. And the life gain is actually pretty helpful in a pinch if you're trying to grab a Vara or a Shadowlands Tyrant. One card we forgot to mention here, Amaran Stinger. This is one of the new cards from Defiance that has really helped out. This card got buffed recently, and it's just outrageously overpowered. 5 Scorpion Traps in the top 20 cards of your enemy deck is really, really good for controlling the board and making it impossible for any sort of big land-based strategies to go through. It also plays really well with all of our killer effects, Twilight Hunt and Xenan Temple. So those types of cards, like basically, it's very easy to get Amaran Stinger across, and when we do, we tend to get a lot of ways to defend our site and to defend ourselves as we basically try to transition into these other creature-based strategies. It really helps out Azindel. It's a great card for defensive purposes because it's just a 2/4 body on the ground, and like, yeah, it's just a really, really solid card. I recommend this in just about any time deck until they hopefully nerf it again. Okay. So Invoke the Waystones is tossing all of these cards into our Void. We then get them back with Grasping at Shadows and Dark Return, and we give them Killer with Twilight Hunt to make sure that we always get something out of resurrecting the cards. So Shadowlands Tyrant, when attacking, gives us that extra damage to an enemy, and Vara Vengeance Seeker, when summoning, allows us to force the opponent to sacrifice a unit, or give ourselves a big ol' hefty bonus that also combines with Predator's Instinct to make very, very nasty things happen. Combined with Lifesteal, that means that this deck has a lot of staying power and is frequently going to be on the board long enough to basically do all of the ridiculous things it wants to do, specifically accumulate all of the power it wants to accumulate. The final addition from Defiance is Xenan Temple, and actually we're going into the market, but we'll come back to that. Xenan Temple steals cards from the enemy to put them into your Void anytime they die. And this is, again, really handy for shutting down Void-based strategies. It's a really powerful card with any type of card that is very good with killer effects, so specifically using it for Lumen Reclaimer, Vara Vengeance Seeker, and Shadowlands Tyrant, all very, very good. You can also use it to give an extra +1 bonus to a Aurelian Merchant or a Amaran Stinger to just kill off a token or give yourself a little bit of leeway against a torch. But very frequently, you'll just use this card to grab another another card with your Xenan Augury and force your opponent into an attacking position when you have a bunch of lifesteal units and deadly units to play with. Basically, the fact that you're shuffling other things into your Void when you have so much Void recursion in the form of Dark Return and Grasping at Shadows means that we get some really, really good benefits, and combined with the defensive capacity of Vara and Tyrant and Stinger and all of our like very unit-focused strategies, we get to do a lot of unit-focused stuff and then frequently actually get our World Joiner out, give it Killer, and go to town. So it's a lot of fun to do. Okay, so last things in the market. Etched Monolith is the go-to card for setup when you are not really having to deal with a lot of scary stuff. This card gives all of your units charge, making your Shadowlands Tyrants particularly ridiculous, and giving you a little bit more play with cards like Royal Guardian that have their infiltrates, and cards like Vara that have a lot of lifesteal. Basically, this allows you to attack in very frequently and deal with sites on point basically just by playing units out onto an empty board. Really, really handy for getting yourself into a better position. The pay 10 ability is not typically come into play here, but every now and then it comes in handy. So something to keep an eye on. We keep an extra copy of Invoke here since it's a very critical card to the list, and we want to have it in the deck to basically shuffle into the market. Sea of Teeth allows us to play a bunch of Razortooth Aranas with Killer and kill all attachments. So it's our central attachment destruction. Remember to fetch it if you're facing off against a scary shadow deck that's playing the Corendon Merchant, because if you suspect that your opponent is grabbing an Azindel's Gift, this card is pretty slow, so you have to grab the Sea of Teeth before Azindel's Gift comes out. Other than that, I'd say just remember that it's like really, really good for Azindels, both Azindels in fact. It powers up Azindel the Wayfinder because you are allowed to kill other people's stuff, and it powers up Azindel Revealed because it gives you a bunch of units to basically deal with your threats and infiltrate onto your opponent. Azindel Revealed is the final kicker in the market. This card is typically very, very useful, but not always. You do have to be in a winning position to play this card, so it's typically a finisher, something that you need to grab if you are feeling like you are actually already in control of the game. And once you do that, you can start stealing cards from your opponent's deck as well as from their Void, and yeah, things get pretty out of control very quickly. So Azindel is one of the nice little top ends, and also a good bookend to Azindel the Wayfinder to sort of round out the list and give it a nice feel of just a lore symmetry, I suppose. But regardless, this list is really, really fun. We kept it pretty sane. There's a lot of crazier things that you can do with this deck, but I would say that for the most part, this is a mild version of just Infinite Invoke the Waystones, and Infinite Invoke the Waystones is a very crazy strategy, so I hope you guys have fun with this. We're going to record a couple of games and show you how it's done. See you there. Alright, here we are up against Evil Strawberry, and we've got a Crest of Mystery and a Seed of Mystery to play with, so yeah, it's probably not enough. Even on the draw, it's a little bit suspect. We do have the Amaran Stinger, but without like an Initiator or Trailmaker to supplement this, I'm a little bit uneasy. I'm going to go ahead and toss it back. Alright, this time we have the Crest and we have a Talir's Favored, so we've got a much smoother power curve leading up to Xenan Temple, which could be a pretty good card even if we don't end up with anything too crazy. So hopefully we'll get something cool out of it. If not, we've definitely got some options. So Strawberry playing out Argenport Banner, looks lovely. Let's go ahead and lead Crest of Mystery here. And then Trailmaker seems like the definite thing to do next. Cargo is overall not too amazing. Let's go ahead and get Shadow here. We now know this deck is in Corendon, which means it's pretty likely to be a Martyr's Chains list, which has Display of Vision and a couple of other things. There are some other options it could be, but most of those options would have played a card on 2 or 3 to empower the card out. So it's pretty likely to be some late game greed with some other forms of shenanigans. Aurelian Merchant here can trade in a card for something we might need, like Etched Monolith, and I'm pretty comfy with that idea. The one thing I do really want to do here is actually play Temple Standard this turn. So the question is, am I going to trade out a Grasping at Shadows or a Xenan Temple for the Etched Monolith, which gives us the Shadowlands Tyrant? That's a really interesting one. There's a couple of different ways that we could play it. I kind of like just doing Talir's Favored here and then playing a power, because that way we have Shadowlands Tyrant and other stuff on time. I don't get to play Etched Monolith, but Tyrant is already a pretty strong card into Temple, so seems okay. Let's go ahead and do that. So we attack on in, get our 2. I would have loved to have Etched Monolith down here since our opponent's not really playing anything too early, but it just wasn't in the cards. We weren't sure if we were going to be able to play our Power 5, and I would have liked to have Shadowlands Tyrant down on time. So, okay, and now we have an Azindel, so we're not feeling too bad about that option. Let's go ahead and do a couple different ways to play this. I think the one I like is let's play Xenan Temple. And I'm going to Xenan Initiation this. And just get rid of this path later, put it in the void. Because our opponent playing Wisps means that they're very likely to be reliant on basically bringing back their Wisp with Soulbringer. The longer we have a Xenan Temple down, the worse it's going to get for them. Karen Cargo. I'm really curious as to what this deck is trying to do. I'm pretty sure it's ramp into Azindel, but I don't have any solid clue yet. We'll find out in a second. Augury gets Vara and Lumen Reclaimer. Lumen Reclaimer on the bottom seems pretty good, so let's do that. And then Azindel the Wayfinder looks lovely, so we'll put that down, and that'll give us access to some Invokes later, or it'll draw attention for, you know, other shenanigans in a short period of time. Alright, there goes Vara. And there goes Hidden Road Smuggler, which could get all manner of interesting things. Okay, so a scare here seems pretty likely. Let's go ahead and swap just Entrancer. We're not going to do anything crazy here. Vara Vengeance Seeker no longer gets to do anything cool, so we'll probably just swap it out for an Invoke. And play an Initiate as a chump blocker for Xenan Temple to help us get that World Joiner out. So, the question now becomes, what did the Argenport Smuggler get? The answer is a Regent's Tomb, which can toss a card out of our hand. Unfortunately, that's going to be Invoke the Waystones. Actually ended up being our Grasping at Shadows, which is not as dangerous as Invoke the Waystones, but it's really hard to recognize that, so we'll feel pretty happy about what we got. Twilight Hunt here kills the Smuggler. We get to attack for 1 here on the site. And then an Invoke the Waystones seems like a pretty appropriate final thing to play. So we pitch up to 14 power, and now we can play Invoke the Waystones twice next turn. Oh, it's actually 15 power. There you go. Lingering Influence gets our opponent a little closer to whatever it is that they're planning on doing. Even if it's Azindel, I think we're pretty comfy with our current setup. We're looking pretty happy. Slay has to happen to the World Joiner. No surprises there. And that gives us 16 power, so we're just slowly pushing it along. Very frequently, because we're always playing pretty scary threats on curve, we get to just play our Invokes freely and not have to worry about Azindel dying.
The Waystones hold great power.
This'll do the trick.
Like here goes another Invoke.
The Waystones hold great power.
And that gets us a Royal Guardian, which gains us 25 life. So attack for 1. Now we got a bunch of threats on board. The Invoke the Waystones is out of control, and we have Royal Guardian, which is probably going to demand a little bit more struggly stuff. Soulbringer, bringing back some Wisps. I believe it gets tribute just from the shenanigans that it already did, so good for it. But we do have lots of ways to make those Wisps go away, so we're not particularly worried at the moment. Do we have a good killer unit? We do have a good killer unit. It's World Joiner. We're going to Grasping at Shadows World Joiner.
You'll do. You're suffering.
I'm going to Killer Pathlighter, I think. Then I'm going to Dark Return our World Joiner here. Kill this, make that go to 0, and then attack for 10 for the Infiltrate, which our opponent saw that line and wisely chose to concede, sadly. Good stuff. Alright, here we are up against Momoy 4, and looks like our opener makes a decent amount of sense. I like the power we've got, I like the Trailmaker into Azindel, so I think we're going to go ahead and keep it and see what we can do. Now, one tricky thing with this deck is we do use Temple Standards to recur killer units, and it's a little tricky because you do have to be careful not to play the Temple Standard if you're or to play the Temple Standard early if you want to actually play out the Azindel. But unfortunately, we're running into a lot of Entrancers tonight, so we won't actually be playing Azindel in the first place. Either way, we're going to go ahead and lead Temple Standard just to make sure that we have enough power to go around for a little bit. Seed of Mystery into Trailmaker gets us Shadow, and then Xenan Banner will get us more Shadow, so we'll be in pretty good shape for the next moments to come. There goes Dark Wisp.
This'll do the trick.
And yeah, since there's a lot of Wisp stuff going around, the main thing we gotta worry about is our opponent getting Xenan Temple before we do, because that kind of just really hurts our chances if we get our Voids messed up. We have powerful stuff in the Void, we want to be able to steal their stuff from the Void, and then like basically not have issues with our stuff going into their Void. Weary Spiteling's a whole thing. I think Vara Vengeance Seeker definitely makes sense here.
It's my turn.
Probably eats Weary Spitling, but could eat the Dark Wisp as well. There's a bunch of different options here. Alright, Annihilate it is. So we'll go ahead and end our turn here and see what we can do. Okay, so things I really want to do right now primarily include Shadowlands Tyrant and Xenan Temple. I think Shadowlands Tyrant is fine here. It's mostly safe. Definitely, like, our opponent is mostly out of tricks, so as long as we play the Tyrant here, we should be fine. I could do Azindel the Wayfinder here, because that'll give us extra power to play Tyrant into Twilight Hunt, and that'll give us a lot more leeway. I think that's probably what I want to do, but it's tricky, because, like, the Xenan Temple allows us to kill several Wisps at the same time, and that might actually be a little bit better. I'm not really afraid of the Shadowlands Tyrant getting removed, so, like, maybe there's an Annihilate here and our day gets a little bit messed up, but if there isn't, then the Xenan Temple should just end this game, because we'll be able to pick up Preserver, we'll be able to pick up some of the Wisps, and basically they won't come back from the Void, which is the big deal here. Alright, Momoy, what do we got? Reserve Dualities is not a surprise. Definitely the thing we want to do here is use our Xenan Initiation to pick up Preserver, and also we could go Dark Wisp, but I think it's better to go for Entrancer or Weary Spitling, since those are the ones that are more dangerous when recurred. Weary Spitling is particularly bad. Entrancer is kind of annoying when it comes back from the Void, but it's less likely to actually be a threat. So there you go. 7 life, plus the 1 that we got from the damage off of Shadowlands Tyrant's attack ability, and we stole the recurring Spitling, so now our Wisp threats are just not as strong. Corendon Merchant's a little scary, pretty likely to pick something up that might actually threaten us. Suffocate's particularly bad, since it gets Trailmaker, and that gets the... well, that gets everything out of the setup. Oh, going for Twilight Hunt. That's not as dangerous. It does basically get us a Corendon Merchant, which I think is pretty worth it. And now we have to make a decision about whether or not to block the Dark Wisp. I'm pretty into blocking the Dark Wisp, since that gives us a chance at getting the Xenan Augury, so that'll get us probably a power to Grasping at Shadows, even though we're going to lose the power here with Trailmaker. So, 1 card drawn. Xenan, another card drawn off of that. Xenan Augury gets us... wow, we really did not pick up what we needed. I can grab this Xenan Temple here and then just use Lumen Reclaimer to shuffle the rest of his Void. That might be worth it, or play Azindel this turn and just sort of keep ourselves occupied. Yeah, let's grab the Xenan Temple, since that's still a card that's very, very useful here. Anything in the market that's perfectly worth shuffling? No, we'll just play Wayfinder. Okay, so we're at 36 health. The next Xenan Temple allows us to clear out the rest of the Wisps that might worry us. Like, basically, we're just not worried about stuff in the Void right now, so there's not going to be a lot of recursion. We still have to deal with Azindel revealed as a threat, so that's something to keep an eye on, but I would say that more or less we're in pretty good shape here. And yeah, Grasping at Shadow or Xenan Temple are both really good. I kind of like Xenan Temple here because it allows me to kill the Entrancer. And the Entrancer is going to be a solid threat to a lot of our other 4-drops, particularly Lumen Reclaimer. Like, I just don't really want that Entrancer coming back. But there are a couple of different ways that we could do it. So Xenan Temple kills the Entrancer, and the Entrancer's gone. But Grasping at Shadow gets us a killer unit with just the ability to knock everything out. I'm a little annoyed with the concept of it coming back, so... but I think it should be fine. Like, we're not too worried about not having Lumen Reclaimer, unless we end up in like a Waystones heavy setup. Like, we are currently controlling the board, so we should play as though we're controlling the board and not worry too much about silencing happening to our merchants or our reclaimers. Okay, so next turn we play Xenan Temple again, we start stealing stuff again, and we basically have a Shadowlands Tyrant that's now dealing 3 damage to an enemy per turn, so seems pretty good. Aha! Another Weary Spiteling and another Happy Steal with Xenan Temple. That, I mean, pretty soon we're going to start seeing like the potential for our opponent to concede. Shutting down enough void-based strategies tends to run these decks out of opportunities very quickly, especially since they rely so much on their recursion. Our deck is a little bit more stable. It has mid-rangey units that are good when they're first played, so unlike Wisp Tribal, it's generally not too worried about the repetitive recursion. The repetitive recursion is just a side benefit of the overall strategy of like sort of Xenan killers. So we'll play the Temple, and Xenan Initiation looks good. Knock that out. And now that Weary Spiteling is ours after entombing and getting the 3/3 and flying. Very, very good stuff. So Crest of Mystery here. And, yep, there you go. Figured he would concede once we shut down all opportunities to recur Weary Spitelings. So, good stuff. Alright, taking a look at this, we got basically everything we need. I think we're going to keep it. It's a little bit awkward because Talir's Favor doesn't lead particularly well into anything else here. Like, basically, just because we have so much depleted power, I don't actually get to use Talir's Favor to knock out a Time Sigil and get Amaran Stinger on 3. So we're really hoping to actually draw one of those undepleted sigils, preferably this turn. But if we don't get one, that's okay. We can just either get it next turn, or we can play Talir's Favor to Trailmaker and get into a position to play Azindel on 4 and not worry about the Stinger so much. Alright, so we need 4 times, so that's what we're going to do next. Play the Seed of Mystery, and then Talir's Favor can get the last of it for us. Okay. Torch makes this a little awkward, but the Time Sigil makes it much easier. I can pretty easily Stinger here. Azindel will probably lead to an Equivocate, but so will Stinger. I think Stinger is probably the correct choice here. Get that Equivocate out of hand as fast as possible. Oh, Display of Instinct. Well, that we could have weathered, but that's okay. We can either Dark Return Amaran Stinger next turn, or we can just play the Azindel and try and get on into some interesting shenanigans. Or we can use Talir's Favor to build ourselves a little power. There's a bunch of choices. Many interesting options available. Okay, so Azindel plus Seat seems like a pretty decent play here, seeing as we've got this Howling Peak Smuggler sort of in the field, grabbing something. Not sure what. Could be Mortar, could be something like the Howling Peak itself. There's a couple of interesting options. I think we'll go for Talir's Favorite here. That gets us extra power to play with. Play our Time Sigil, Dark Return our Amaran Stinger, and that gets us a 3/5 to attack with, which will probably prompt a block and some sort of damage spell. Or we might get a bunch of 1/1s. I'm pretty happy with that result. Initiate builds out a little bit more power. Now we're looking to draw into something shenanigan-y. So Howling Peak here is definitely going to be worth at least a gun down. That's going to be some problems. Heart of the Vault not bothering us quite as much. That Echo card is almost certainly a find the way in a deck like this. There's not much else that it could be. We'll Twilight Hunt here to get a Deadly Scorpion. Those can be pretty handy, and I need the Nightfall at this point because we're running a little low on cards. Another Twilight Hunt is pretty decent in Nightfall. I think without anything mid-rangey to actually put in, I'm looking for either Recursion or an Invoke, so we'll try and draw that. Yeah, not too surprised to see the Howling Peak. There's probably going to be a gun down. It might be on Azindel, but my guess would be it's going to be on the Stinger. Okay, so we'll have to weather the Howling Peak for a little bit. There's not much we can do about it. Another Amaran Stinger's pretty good. That actually gives us some good options to attack into the peak.
I'll finish this quickly.
I kind of like attacking the player again, because the peak is probably not going to get damaged. So you might as well either force the actual smuggler to block, or play around it a little bit. So I'm going to see probably Caleb's favor here. And then there will be something that my opponent wants to mirror image, which hopefully we can get with a little bit more oomph. Ooh, but all of these damage spells means it might not be a good card that gets mirror imaged. Yeah, Jotun Hurler. Okay, so Howling Peak got pretty limited effect here. We did have to sort of let it all go off, which is not lovely, especially since like now we're looking at Deadly Scorpions again. I do like Deadly Scorpions here because it wastes the mirror image, so I think we'll go ahead and go for that. It also, like, our Azindel is starting to look really good here. We'll hold on to this power so we can trade it into merchants, and probably just... It might be worth pinging the Howling Peak since the person's health is not really all that important here. I'm not terribly likely to get a hold of Caleb, a hold of the Howling Peak before Caleb pops out, but at the very least we want to do something about it before things get nuts, so. Mirror Image fizzles, no card value from that. Permafrost, we don't care, like that's exactly what we want out of those Scorpions, is to have Permafrost going off on them. Go ahead and attack in again, plunk the site. Eventually we're going to have to do something about that, but at the moment we can't do anything, so. My opponent's going to get a chance to pitch and see if they can find some more useful cards. Oh, a Moonstone Vanguard, not bad. One of the nice things about our current setup is that the Moonstone Vanguard can attack into a Scorpion that is on the top of his deck, because basically, like, if they draw the top card of their deck, then it's possible it's going to be a Scorpion, and they have no way of knowing until that actually happens. I also can use Sea of Teeth here to free the Scorpion that I've got, but it's way more fun to do Invoke here, especially since we've got a fully functioning Azindel. We can already Invoke twice. Let's get the engine going, because this is what makes the deck really satisfying, is the games where we actually get to do this kind of fun stuff. Ooh, a Temple Tactic. I'll use that to free us of the Permafrost. Go ahead and throw another Invoke out. There's a Scorpion. And we get a Shadow Source, not too bad. I'm up to 25 power, which means that I'll get 3 Invokes next turn, and I managed to rid myself of a Permafrost, so I'm starting to get up in card advantage. As I said, there's a Scorpion. Really fun when that happens. Let's just do a single block. Actually, no, let's do a double. I think I really need this to be dead, and there's probably going to be some sort of single target removal. Okay, so less card advantage for our opponent, but is going to pitch for Caleb and see if they can find some more useful stuff. Certainly this deck still has plenty of advantage. However, it's very much on 1 card a turn, and that's going to make it a lot tougher, especially considering how many Scorpions we're generating and how many threats we're generating. So, play out our Invoke.
The Waystones hold great power.
There is a second Azindel in our Void now, which might be a good thing to get back.
The Waystones hold great power.
Odds are pretty good my opponent is holding onto a Display of Instinct here, which is a not terrible thing to have. I like grasping at shadows here. Royal Guardian's pretty good. That's 31 health and a very decent unit. Other options include our Killer Scorpion and Vara. I think Royal Guardian definitely makes the most sense here. Go ahead and gain 31, get up to 53 health, and we'll try one more Invoke. Ooh. Hey, there's a Shadowlands Tyrant. That's the nice scaling we're looking for. We'll go ahead and end out our turn. So up another 10 power off of just that. If you get multiple Azindels out, this is a lot faster, but obviously anything that just kind of forces our opponent to throw different responses out is good. We got Torch into Snowball again. So that's another dead thing, and then this just turns into extra power on Azindel, which is something that I do very much want.
Don't make me angry.
Alright, there goes a Jotun's Hurler. That Xenan banner will definitely be played, I think.
The Waystones hold great power.
Xenan Temple's perfect. There's a couple of different things we can do with this. I think Xenan Augury makes the most sense here. I want to grab something useful, like Grasping at Shadows. I've got 23 cards left in deck, so we gotta pay attention to whether or not we actually want that Grasping at Shadows. Do I have a... I do not have a Lumen Reclaimer yet, so let's go ahead and invoke again.
The Waystones hold great power.
And then, picked up a Trailmaker. Not an amazing hit, but we're slowly filling out our board and we've got plenty of good blockers. I'm down to about 13 cards, but I am definitely going to hit what I need. Sea of Teeth breaks the Permafrost. Azindel doesn't do much here. I think Sea of Teeth is definitely more fun. So let's pick that up so we can break our Royal Guardian out, and then if we get attacked here, that's not too big a deal. We've also played a decent amount of power, so even though our Azindel is missing at the moment, we're not in a particular zone of threat. Xenan Initiation's interesting. I think definitely we're going to put Xenan Initiation on Royal Guardian. And then we're going to Sea of Teeth here. So we can now kill her the 4/4. That was a lovely smack, and I unfortunately did make a mistake on the attack here where I didn't actually get what I wanted, but if we attack both of these guys into the site, then the Razortooth can finish off the job. Or we could just, like, keep invoking.
The Waystones hold great power.
Alright, so I've got 8 cards left. I gotta remember to be careful not to invoke anytime when I wouldn't be able to Grasping at Shadows afterwards, but I think we're pretty good to go. Another invoke.
The Waystones hold great power.
Twilight Hunt allows us to give killer to this Vara. And there's almost certainly a Lumen Reclaimer in here. Yep, there it is. So let's go ahead and... I think we're just going to end our turn this turn. Call it good. Oh, poor Scorpion Trap did not give us a killer unit, sadly. Oh, I could have used the Vara to kill the 4/4. We were rushing to meet the turn end, so not too big a deal, but something that we do need to pay attention to. Oh, this is interesting. I wonder what we're gonna get here. Caleb's Choice would be a good call, seeing as we need a Grasping at Shadows here. Okay. Well, there's a couple of things to play with here, but the obvious ones are fairly simple. I guess we'll throw a Scare on that. Temple Tactic allows us to get the Royal Guardian back. Let's go ahead and just kill her this. I have no cards left in hand, so... However, we don't lose at end of turn if we have an empty deck. We just have to Grasping at Shadows. Get our Lumen Reclaimer back. And once we shuffle back up, the whole thing resets. We don't die, so we're good to go. And that's what we're looking for. That moment right there. That's generally the satisfying blow. All right. That was good stuff. Alright, that does it for today's video. People are always asking me to put Flame Blast in this deck because having that much power with Azindel is worth a pretty awesome Flame Blast. So here's the version with Flame Blast in the deck. I would say that generating triple fire influence is actually pretty hard for this deck since it's trying to do a lot of other things involving very, very deep influence costs, but you do get to leverage Jack the Lone Gun and also Bren, Chronicler of Ages, both of which work very well with Invoke the Waystones in very different ways. Jack has that tribute ability to kill an enemy unit and void bound those units as well, which is super awesome. And Bren, of course, allows us to get extra power for playing spells, which combined with Invoke the Waystones means that Bren will also gain additional power every turn. Not quite as fast as Azindel, but for a 2-cost 1/3, definitely not a bad deal. So pretty fun stuff. Thank you guys so much for watching. You can find me on Twitch and Patreon, as well as here on YouTube. We will be putting out some more stuff soon, and I thank you so much for watching. See you guys next time, and have a lovely day. Cheers.